Okay, school committee meeting will come to order. Pursuant to the open meeting law, any person may make an audio-video recording of this public meeting or may transmit the meeting through any medium. Attendees are therefore advised that such recordings or transmissions are being made, whether perceived or unperceived by those present, and are deemed acknowledged and permissible. If you could have a roll call, please.
Here.
Here.
Mr. Hetzler? Mr. Corey?
Here.
Mr. Martins?
Here.
Mayor Correa?
Here, and a salute to the flag. Pledge allegiance to the flag.
Which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We do not have anyone signed up for citizen input at this time, and we do not have any recognition awards this evening, so we'll go right to the superintendent's report. And also, I want to welcome Lisa. Lisa, if you want to introduce yourself, you're more than welcome to.
Hi, I'm Lisa Scorpio. I'm the superintendent's new executive assistant. Thank you for having me.
Nice to have you here. Welcome our board, yeah. Warm Fall River School System welcome. Mr. Corey?
And Mr. Chairman, if I may, I'd just like to take a moment to recognize one of our own up here, and that's Deb Cabral, our secretary in the school committee. And she won a wonderful award last month, and got a nice ceremony at the State House for her extracurricular work in the district. Thank you so much, Deb, for all your concern for the local citizens.
Excellent.
God bless you.
Okay. Very nice. Very good. Okay, Superintendent, your report?
Sure. First item on the list tonight is the Durfee construction update. As you know, the steel arrived last week. We're coming in about 3 trucks a day of steel coming down from Quebec. That steel is being segmented into the sections of the building that it will go, and as I understand, sometime this week when the crane arrives, they'll start the erecting of the steel section at a time, all 3 floors. Once that's done and starts, what I'm told is that each section of the building takes about 14 days. So if you do the math on that, by the winter, we should have the entire frame of the building built, which is pretty exciting. Concurrent with that is the work that's happening in the athletic area. The pool has been demoed, the pool area, and that work will continue as we move forward in the year. But at the same time, we've built the locker areas that will serve as temporary locker areas while we do the entire retrofit of the phys ed space. I was up there today. We probably have 70 people on site every day working, and those numbers will increase as the steel continues to arrive, and it's really exciting. We tweeted out earlier today construction cam, so you can actually watch the construction live from your house if you have nothing else to do. And which is why not? And so that's we tweeted that out. So check that link out and have fun. Now we're not just doing Durfee High School work this summer though. Ken and his team, we have work going on at Tansy at Watson with the MSBA. Tansy's ahead in that process, and that's full ADA compliance, windows, bathrooms, and boilers. We're going to be ready for opening of school, and they're working hard over there. Watson is a step behind, but that work has begun. Concurrent with that, Ken's also has a team working on Talbot. We just did the gym floor, putting new bleachers in, painting the entirety of the gym. We're putting a court outside, doing some more work that the school committee approved around locks and those kinds of things, entrances at Talbot and at Green. We have a brand new gym floor installed, polyed and lined. Really exciting. They're fired up over there as well. Our schools look great. Custodians are cleaning things up, getting ready for opening. We don't open in September anymore. It's August 27th or 28th, one of those days, and we're gonna be ready, and our teams are doing a great job. Concurrent with all the construction, of course, is the hiring. Our human resources team, with our principals, have worked extremely hard to ensure that we've made timely and appropriate hires following our due diligence, and we've been able to do that. We don't have as many openings as we had last year at this time. I'll have a more formal report about any other positions in one of my Friday memos in terms of how many we've hired and what we have left. But we filled all the major positions, and we still have openings for some paras, and we're still filling some teacher roles. But, thanks to our FREA partners, retention's been good. And we want to appreciate and respect our teachers for staying and doing the good work that we do in the Fall River Public Schools. And that goes also for our colleagues in the FRAA who have also stayed. So our openings aren't, I'm not worried about positions. We've been able to make some really good hires. We've been able to promote from within at times as well. And that's the key of a strong school system. So with that, that's my report for tonight. And there's a lot of agenda items that we'll talk about. I know there'll be questions, and we look forward to some good discourse tonight.
Superintendent, how many new positions have been filled? Total new positions?
I told you I was going to send you that in a Friday email, exact figure, but put me on the spot. I'm going to say we've probably filled, in terms of the new positions, we've probably filled 40 or so, with probably 10 more in the pipeline, and then out of those 70 new positions, we haven't filled those paras yet, so that's next on the list.
So you're looking to fill a total of 70 new
Well, we have
positions?
70 new positions in the budget, yes.
Okay. All right, thank you.
And we're well over half.
Mr. Coogan?
I'll piggyback on what the mayor said. I just want to make sure we acknowledge the work by our subcommittees and the legislature this year in making sure that the gateway communities got additional funds at a breathtaking rate. I can't say enough about Senator Roderick, Representative Sylvia, Fiola, and Schmidt. They all grounded out, and they delivered a lot of money to the city of Fall River, which we all want to improve the learning environment for all the kids in this city and improve the teachers and their craft. And I can't say enough about what they did. Thank you.
Other questions, comments? Okay. Student delegate report. Our student delegate is not here. They're probably enjoying the summer. Next is the approval of the minutes. Is there a motion?
Make a motion.
Motion has been made to approve the minutes. Is there a second? Seconded. Roll call, please.
Mr. Agia?
Yes.
Mr. Coogan?
Yes.
Mr. Costa?
Yes.
Mr. Hetzler? Mr. Corey?
Yes.
Mr. Martin? Yes. Mayor Correa?
Yes. We have a number of travel requests this evening. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve all travel requests.
Motion to approve all travel requests has been made. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded. Roll call, please.
Mr. Agia?
Yes.
Mr. Coogan?
Oh, 1 second. Can you just redo the vote, please? Roll call.
Mr. Agia?
Yes.
Mr. Coogan?
Yes.
Mr. Costa?
Yes.
Mr. Hetzler? Mr. Corey?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mayor Correa?
Yes. We have a number of donations this evening for our approval. Is there a motion to accept all donations?
Make a motion.
Motion's been made. Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Agia?
Yes.
Mr. Coogan?
Yes.
Mr. Costa?
Yes.
Mr. Hetzler? Mr. Corey?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mayor Correa?
Yes. And Superintendent, can you read the donations, please?
Sure. From Project Lead the Way to Durfee High School, $12,000. From Project Lead the Way to Laterno Elementary School, $9,000. From Project Lead the Way to Morton Middle School, $8,000. The Durfee Hilltopper Athletic Foundation donated to Durfee High School Athletic Program, $2,400. And Bay Coast Bank to Sylvia Elementary School, $567. We wish to thank our donors for their philanthropic support.
Thank you. Okay, we have a number of contracts for approval this evening. There are many due to the new school year approaching. So what we'll do, for time's sake, is if there are specific questions, just tell me the name of the contract, and we'll keep those separate, and then we'll take a motion to approve all of the contracts. Any members have questions on specific contracts?
Yes.
Mr. Corey, which one?
The first one, Katie Brown.
Okay, Katie Brown.
I know it's been in our system
Well,
for quite...
one second,
I'm
Mr.
sorry.
Corey. I'm just going to separate all the ones that
Yes,
committee
okay.
members have questions about,
We'll
and then
talk
we'll
later. All right.
take the motions. Mr. Aguirre?
Just a point of clarification on the Title I. Those that say Title I, and it's not a question on any of the specifics, it's just that if, I think we got some different information on the Title I funding. So it's just a clarification that will generally, the Title I budget will come to us for approval before the money gets spent, or is that?
You approve our writing of the grant.
So just asking, like, in the past, Title I was $500,000, let's say. We would get $500,000, here's what we're going to spend money on Title I. We would vote on that, and then it would go through. We vote for all grants, the line items within all grants, I believe.
You vote to approve the writing of competitive grants. So when we write the grants, we bring it to the committee, committee approves it. We've already
Right, but we
included
don't
what
have-
we've already included what we're spending it on in those grants, in
But
the
we-
application.
How do I want to say this? And I'm not trying to be difficult, but if we have a grant that comes in a lot more than what we thought we were going to get,
Yes.
when do we, as a school committee, get a bite at the apple to decide what that money's going to be spent
I'll
on?
bring
Because it's
forward
not a-
recommendations at the start of the school year, probably in August.
That's what I'm saying,
Yeah,
it's going to
there's-
come back, that's my
so-
question, it's not,
On Title I, we have some more money.
so I'm saying that we're going to get a bite at the apple of what we spend that on, and whenever you can get around to it,
Yeah.
for what the needs are.
For the additional dollars that are unallocated.
Yeah,
Yeah.
all right, thank you, I yield.
Thank you. If there are no other questions on grants,
Motion to approve?
motion to approve all grants, with exception of Katie Brown Educational Program. Second. Roll call.
Mr. Agia?
Yes.
Mr. Coogan?
Yes.
Mr. Costa?
Yes.
Mr. Hetzler? Mr. Corey?
Yes.
Mr. Martins?
Yes.
Mayor Correa?
Yes. And taking Katie Brown Educational Program separately, Mr. Corey, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know the Katie Brown program's been with our school department for a long time, and all I really want to know is where's the oversight, and if somebody could, from Katie Brown, could come and give us a report at a future meeting, I would appreciate that very much.
Superintendent?
We can definitely do that. There's also an executive briefing that when it comes out, usually comes out in August. I'll get a copy of that for the committee as well.
That's great.
I haven't read it yet. It's in a pile, so I'll get that out to everybody, too.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the Katie Brown grant?
So moved.
Motion's been made. Is there a second?
Second?
Roll call.
Mr. Agia?
Yes.
Mr. Coogan?
Yes.
Mr. Costa?
Abstain.
Mr. Hetzler? Mr. Corey?
Abstain.
Mr. Martins?
Yes.
Mayor Correa?
Yes. Thank you. We have two grants this evening for approval, if the committee chooses to. Is there a motion or questions on the two grants?
Motion to approve?
Motion to approve all
Second.
grants has been made and seconded. Roll call, please.
Mr. Agia?
Yes.
Mr. Coogan?
Yes.
Mr. Costa?
Yes.
Mr. Hetzler? Mr. Corey?
Yes.
Mr. Martins?
Yes.
Mayor Correa?
Yes. Moving right along into discussion. Number one, vote to approve. That's the selection and appointments of Stephanie Francis, Naomi Tavares, Robin Borges, and Nicole Sadek as nurses for the Fall River Public Schools.
So moved.
Motion has been made. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, questions? Roll call, please.
Mr. Agia?
I got a question, sorry.
Oh, you did have a question.
Yeah,
Okay.
Just,
Mr. Aguirre?
a general question on, I want to say that at one point we had 5 openings at the start of the year.
Appointed nurse, and she was grant funded, so she was transferred over to local funds. That was one.
One of the 5.
These are the other 4.
And then there's still needs in the department?
There's still one that is in the budget that the superintendent has added as a new position.
Yeah, so
It's
it's
not
just,
filled yet.
but you have a lot of needs, is what I'm saying, and
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
We always do.
I hear you. Thank you, I yield.
Thank you.
Motion to approve has been made and seconded. Roll call.
Mr. Agia?
Yes.
Mr. Coogan? Yes. Mr. Costa?
Yes.
Mr. Hetzler? Mr. Corey?
Yes.
Mr. Martins?
Yes.
Mayor Correa?
We use the term contract and we voted on contracts.
I believe the mayor said grants.
We have to correct that.
My vote is a yes, but what's the question on the, in terms of contracts?
We voted the grants, the contracts, we use the term grants, we just have to use the term contracts in the first part.
Okay. Is there a motion to vote on all grants, all contracts together? There was terminology that was grants instead of contracts. Motion has been made, just a house cleaning item. Okay, motion has been made to approve all contracts, and it was seconded by Mr. Aguirre. Roll call, please.
Mr. Agia?
Yes.
Mr. Coogan?
Yes.
I apologize.
Okay, hold on.
Nevertheless,
Hold on, there's a question by Mr. Martins. Mr. Martins, you have the floor. Question?
On number 2, this is the Durfee, next year's curriculum. I thought we were on discussion, you wanted all of it.
Not on 2. Discussion on the grants.
Contracts.
I apologize.
We're just revoting contracts, so motion's been made and seconded.
Please, when you speak into the mic,
Yep.
one of the things that happens here is that it's polite, I understand, just to look at whoever is speaking. That is certainly polite. Unfortunately, what happens is that I can't hear, and I apologize for
I
my
understand.
disability, but unfortunately, if you would kindly speak into the microphone, I'll be able to hear what you're saying.
Understand, Mr. Martins, thank you. So we're just going to revote contracts, and there was a motion made and seconded, so we're going to roll call for all contracts approved. Roll call, please.
Mr. Agia?
Yes.
Mr. Coogan?
Yes.
Mr. Costa?
Yes.
Mr. Hetzler? Mr. Corey?
Yes.
Mr. Martins?
Yes.
Mayor Correa?
Yes. Okay, we have voted for grants, and we're back to discussion item number 2, and this is the discussion and vote to approve Durfee High School Program of Studies addendum. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Motion's been made. Is there a second?
Second.
Questions?
Yes, a question.
Mr. Martins?
We are on discussion number 2.
Correct.
Thank you. I am very pleased to see an increase of 9, well, a total of 9 CVTE programs at Durfee, allowing the students to have more choices in what they want to do through their education at Durfee, and perhaps carry on to post-secondary education and into careers. So I'm very pleased to see that. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions, comments? Mr. Corey?
Yes, if I might echo Committeeman Martin's commendation there. I know that it's a vision of this school committee to look at CTE and Chapter 74 funding and to steadily keep building the program into the future. I commend the school committee for thinking that way. Thank you.
Thank
I
you.
yield.
Mr. Aguirre?
Just looking at the document, on page 9, it comes up with each class, and it looks like there's 2 guidance counselors in some houses and 3 in others, and can I get an explanation of that? Looks like class of 11 has 3, other ones have 2.
This part will be updated. This is last year's information. This was the document that you approved this past spring so that we could do the scheduling for this current year upcoming. At the time, if you look at grade 11, you see that there are 3 names there. Kerry Bulk is our lead counselor for the school. When Mr. Woodward's duties and job changed to be a district director of counseling 6 to 12, she picked up additional duties and her caseload was thus reduced. So she has a partial caseload where the other 2 guidance counselors carry a fuller load.
First I heard of that, just being honest.
Okay.
You know, when
That's
we
not
created a
anything we've hidden
position,
along the way.
when we created a position, a stipended position district-wide, and no one told us that we were going to take some duties away and give it to another person. So I know you said it was going to be updated. I hope I get some better information because I don't like to get it in that fashion. If we're going to create a position, and it might not be your problem, Mr. Damaris, but when we, as a school committee, get presented with, we're going to create a position, we need to get the whole story. If that whole story was, we're going to create a lead guidance counselor, but we're going to have to take something away from somebody else and give duties to somebody else, I get a bad memory sometimes, but I certainly would have remembered that. And just think it's not a good thing, necessarily. I think this is, the changes that you have here requested are what you brought to the instructional subcommittee. Is there any difference, or is that the same?
No, that's what we discussed at that last
And trying to meet the
instructional
needs of the health, PE, vocational, I'm all on board with that. I think that's a good thing, and you're trying to be creative. I do like that, so I'm certainly going to approve this. Thank you.
Okay. Further questions, comments? Roll call.
Mr. Agia?
Yes.
Mr. Coogan?
Yes.
Mr. Costa?
Yes.
Mr. Hetzler? Mr. Corey?
Yes.
Mr. Martins?
Yes.
Mayor Correa?
Yes. Item number 3, discussion and vote to approve request to use Durfee High School lobby. Is there a motion, questions?
I'll make the motion.
Motion has been made to
Second.
approve, seconded. Questions, comments? Vice Chair Costa?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just asked through you, Mr. Chair, if we can have Mr. Pacheco come to the podium.
Mr. Pacheco?
Good evening, Mr. Pacheco. So these types of requests seem to have trickled in over the years. I know the committee, since I've been on the committee, we've approved some and we've denied some requests.
Yes.
Is this an issue that needs the committee to create policy on, so it gives you clear guidance as to what the parameters will be before the committee accepts it or denies these requests, or? It just seems like they keep trickling in.
This is
And
the
so-
first one since I've been here, in 3 years, so we don't have a lot of requests. My feeling is that we are going to get more requests, especially when the buildings are separated. So,
My personal feeling, I'm only one member, is that at that time, I think the committee should probably consider creating a policy that speaks to the use of, the educational facility for purposes of having a social hour. We've done it in the past, and I don't mind doing it, in this particular instance, because it's spelled out pretty clearly that the organizers understand, the type of liability insurance they're going to need and so on and so forth. It just, we've had organizations I know that have come to us for fundraising purposes, and I believe the last one it was before us we denied based on the type of event.
Sure.
So maybe giving some clarification by this committee to the administration as to what would be considered, what wouldn't be considered, what the criterion would be in order to consider it maybe a better venue than bringing them back.
Absolutely.
as they come along. I agree. I would imagine that as the new building is built, that there are going to be more requests for the use of the foyers and other places for social activity. This is taking place on a Saturday, so I don't have any concerns about students being in the building. The only request that I didn't see it here, actually, you know what? I apologize. It is there, was the police detail. I know customarily we've had those organizations purchase a police detail, paid detail to be present based on the number of individuals. So other than that, I thank you for bringing it forward. I don't have any further questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Roll call. Oh, Mr. Aguirre, question?
I'm definitely in favor of this, but I do think that a policy would make sense. So can I amend this to also refer this to the facility subcommittee for future
Second.
discussion? I yield.
Okay. So you're approving, you're not sending this, though, to the...
Yeah, approve this one and then
Okay.
send it also so we can have a meeting
Okay.
about it.
All right, motion has been made. Is there a second to, there was a second by Mr. Costa. Roll call.
Mr. Agia?
Yes.
Mr. Coogan?
Yes.
Mr. Costa?
Yes.
Mr. Hetzler? Mr. Corey?
Yes.
Mr. Martins?
Yes.
Mayor Correa?
Yes. And that was as amended for the amendment, so we'll do a roll call on the new package. Is there a motion? Motion
It
is
was
made.
before, yep.
Yep, seconded. Roll call.
Mr. Agia?
Yes.
Mr. Coogan?
Yes.
Mr. Costa?
Yes.
Mr. Hetzler? Mr. Corey?
Yes.
Mr. Martins? Mayor Correa?
Yes. Superintendent?
Issues around building usage and policy, I'll get a current draft from MASC as to their newest version of that policy, because this is an issue. It is, Ken's right, we haven't had one of these come forward in the 3 years that I've been here, but it's something that we need to have clarity about, and I'll get a draft policy from them, and we can start from there.
Good.
Item number 4 is discussion vote to approve the dedication of the Dorn Playground.
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve has been made and seconded. Mr. Corey?
Second.
Oh, seconded. Questions, comments? Mr. Aguirre?
Yeah, just briefly, this came up to the Facilities Subcommittee. Mr. Alves was a longtime champion of all things Fall River. He owned a restaurant off Columbia Street, and he very much supported the Doran School, so I think this is more than appropriate to name the playground in his memory. And I do appreciate the support of everyone on the committee and in the community. He was a great man, and he will be sorely missed. I yield.
Thank you. Mr. Coogan?
Yeah, when this came up, myself and Mr. Pacheco went down to the Doran School and looked at the plaque of the original names on the building of the school, and obviously Mr. Alves was there. We later attended a testimonial for him, and this is more than appropriate, and I know it's going to pass unanimously, and I appreciate all the support. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Vice Chair?
I'll just be brief. I don't want to belabor the point. It certainly should pass unanimously this evening. Mr. Alves did do a great deal for this community. His family, the level of philanthropy that he did, not just with students, but just the general public. His service to the city as both a city council and a businessman. This is certainly a apt way to recognize Mr. Alves in a long-standing way that's very appropriate. I certainly was happy to entertain it as the chair of the subcommittee, and certainly will support it this evening. With that, I yield.
Mr. Corey?
Yeah, when you think of the terms selfless and pride and family values, it's Al Alves. Really happy about this. Thank you.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mr. Agia?
Yes.
Mr. Coogan?
Yes.
Mr. Costa?
Yes.
Mr. Hetzler? Mr. Corey?
Yes.
Mr. Martins?
Yes.
Mayor Correa?
Yes. Item number 5 is discussion vote to approve Durfee High School food pantry signage. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve has been made. Is there a second? Questions?
Yes.
Here.
Mr. Martins?
I thought the signs were to have Fall River Public Schools and Durfee High School as prominent as the word Stop and Shop. That's something that I brought up when the gentleman and that lady was here.
So logos and the Durfee crest on the signs to be as prominent as Stop and Shop.
Well, but not only the logo, because, but the words that Fall River Public Schools, you can have a logo with it, and Durfee High School with its logo with it as well. But the words Fall River Public Schools, Durfee High School, to be as prominent, because when I look through here, I don't see it on these drafts or pictures of what it would look like.
On the last page of that handout, Mr. Martins, there's one of the signs, and on the bottom it says in partnership with Fall River Public Schools. Fall River Public Schools is on all of them. You're absolutely right that Durfee is not.
But, well, I see in partnership with has got the school logo, which you need glasses on top of glasses to see as far as this picture is concerned. But certainly, the Stop and Shop is quite prominent. The food pantry naturally larger in there, and working together to help our community enjoy better food and better lives. And that's all great. However, Fall River Public Schools should be, in partnership with Fall River Public Schools and BMC Durfee High School.
Sure. It's the will of the committee. Whatever we need, whatever is voted in tonight will be sent over to Stop and Shop with the recommendation that that's what the committee approved.
Well, in that case, I move that such be placed on these signs.
Second. You're going to offer an amendment?
Yes.
Second.
Okay, motion has been made to amend the signs. On the motion, was this vetted by any of the students? The logo and stuff? Mr. Pacheco?
The logo was not vetted by the students.
And the
It was not.
wording?
It was, this went to subcommittee, and that's it. It came from Stop and Shop to subcommittee.
I really think this particular issue might need to be tabled, in my opinion. It is the will of the committee, but I think that student involvement in this, whether it be student government or some other group at Durfee, really is important. This is a sign that's going to be in Durfee High School. It's for students, and it's a sensitive topic, being that it is a food pantry. So I don't know if that's the will of the students that are going to be using this food pantry, if that's what they would like it to be called. It might need to be called something else, and I think that you, by simply saying that students were not involved in the process of approving the signage that they're going to be accustomed to in their school, not us on a day-to-day basis, is important. So I would make a motion to table which supersedes any other motion. I'm looking for a second on the motion to table.
Second.
Seconded. Questions, discussion on the motion to table?
None on a motion to table.
No, roll call.
Question.
No questions on motion to table. Roll call.
But going back to what you just said, I mean, again, and I understand about
Counsel just
speed, but nevertheless,
Mr.
your
Martins.
face is that way, and I can't
Mr.
get
Martins,
your
counsel
attention.
just informed me that there are no questions on a motion to table. Therefore, we cannot entertain any questions on a motion to table. Therefore, I'm going to ask for a roll call vote on the motion to table. If you don't agree with the motion to table, then vote against it. If you agree with it, based on the statement I made and the motion I made, vote for it. Roll call.
Mr. Agia?
No.
Mr. Coogan? No. Mr. Costa?
No.
Mr. Hetzler? Mr. Corey?
Yes.
Mr. Martins?
No,
Mayor Correa?
Yes. Motion does not carry. Back to the amended motion. Mr. Martins, you still have the floor.
I understand the need to have student involvement in there, that perhaps that they would be going home and talking to their parents that this might be available. I don't see students themselves during the school day going in to get pantry items in there. Where would they put them? Or say, well, hold it until the end of the day, and I'll take it home in there. But certainly, in part, they'll get very quickly, they'll get accustomed to its operation. Once it's started and it is utilized, it was my understanding that this was going to be open to the public in need in there. So I don't, certainly the students are part of the public, I understand that. And they may very well go and, hopefully go home and say, hey, look, Mom and Dad, this is available, and I don't know if there's mechanics in which it could be where, okay, tell them that this is what I need at home or whatnot, or if the parents have to come in. I'm sure Stop and Shop has certain rules that you don't go in for an ice cream sandwich only. So I think that the students will very quickly get accustomed to its operation. I yield.
Thank you. Other questions, comments? Mr. Aguirre?
Yeah, just a couple of things. So I actually voted against this at the subcommittee, and I just want to articulate a few of the reasons why. I was always under the belief that it would be a public schools food pantry that would be supported by Stop and Shop, was the way I thought it was going to be, and it appeared to me at the subcommittee that this is Stop and Shop's food pantry, sort of as an aside, in the Fall River School. So similar to what Mr. Martins is saying, I had a few questions about that at that time. Since then, I had just a thought and a question on the liability of running this out of the school. Have we looked at that at all?
I'm not following you with the liability portion.
So any kind of liability, so if we're having it at our school
Yes.
and we give food out of the pantry that's in the Fall River schools to somebody and they get ill, somebody walks in to get it and they fall down, or like things like that, are we now still liable as a school system, or is it Stop and Shop because it's their food pantry?
From what I've been told, the Stop and Shop piece, as far as the food quality, is Stop and Shop's liability. The pantry itself is going to be, the public is not necessarily going to go into the pantry. What's going to happen is there's going to be a a subscribed amount of food that will be given out to each family that have been identified at the school level. Those bags will be put together by our students and then delivered by our people in the course of the days leading up to the Friday by the food nutrition people. So those drivers will be dropping off a bag that is already designated with a person's name on it, and that'll be given out at the school level. So there's nobody going into the pantry to do this stuff. The only thing that Stop and Shop had talked about along with Whitson's was that there may be special events such as a chef from Whitson's coming down to show a prepared meal with some of the stuff that we're giving them. That would be open to the public, but not necessarily in the pantry. That may be held in the cafeteria or something like that. So as far as people going in, it's not set up like a supermarket. That's not what's going to happen. It's going to be put together by us and then hand-delivered to the schools.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to support this. I do think needy people, we're here to help. I get all that. I'm a little just concerned about the operation of it. We're going to run it, and then it could turn into a mess, and how do we get it back and control it a little better? I'm assuming that you're going to be in charge?
Yes.
And Mr. Cutting sort of...
And Mr. Cutting,
more
yes.
on a daily basis. So
Yes.
the fact that I think that we are in conjunction with them, it sounds like the more we're talking about it, I would agree with the amendment to say that in conjunction with, or some sort of language to sort of make it equal. I think that would make sense. The other thing I brought up at the time was, what if someone else wanted to donate to this endeavor, another company or something? If we made it Stop and Shops only, it would eliminate some of the other people that might have backpacks or this or that, whatever it is. So I think sort of making it in conjunction with more equally will allow us to get more potentially at some point. But I do want to make sure that it gets done, because I think it's actually already happening.
It's being stocked. We have not given out any food, but the pantry itself is being stocked. Yes.
Yeah, and one of the things, I think it said that they had given out some food already, which I'm not opposed to. I think it's...
I don't believe that, but...
I do want to support it. So with that amendment, that I think the amendment is actually just to clarify that it'll be similar. Is that what the actual language is going to say? Can somebody repeat
My
that?
understanding on the motion that was made by Mr. Martins as an amendment is that the wording would be equal, so that it is in partnership with the Fall River Public Schools at Durfee High School.
And is it other students in the district or just Durfee High School?
It's all of our schools.
Right. I mean, part of me wants to say it should be in conjunction with the Fall River Public Schools rather than at Durfee, because we are going to have, it is posted at Durfee, but it's going to be one room at Durfee, but there's food's going to go throughout the entire community. So, I mean, I'll support the amendment because I do think it should be somewhat equal, but I want to make sure that the whole district gets the benefit. With that, I yield.
Thank you. Mr. Corey.
Mr. Pacheco, point of clarification. So students that have been identified, is that from within the school?
So the school would identify guidance, those who have a better handle on the...
Those that are the neediest,
Exactly.
you know?
Those names would come to us, and the amount, I think we had set a limit at 16 per school, so that we could see how we would handle that many per week. And then we could increase that number as the supply. Stop and Shop did not put any kind of limit. So they wanted to see how this would get started. They said, along with Bob Cutting, this number seems to be doable. It's not, a number we can't handle. And that's where we're starting. But it is being identified at the site level and then brought to us just to facilitate.
So I like the idea that Committeeman Aguirre just brought up to maybe revise some language. I'm thinking out of the box here just for a moment. It's an admirable program. I like it. I'd love to support it. I'm thinking, Mr. Superintendent, to incentivize attendance all throughout our district, and I was just wondering if we can tie in an attendance incentive to this program. Is there any chance for anything like that? I'm thinking clearly out of the box, but just thought I'd ask the question.
Yeah, I don't see why we couldn't, and we'll think about that as we roll it out, but
It's a way to drive our attendance numbers. It's a way to get the kids into school regularly. It shows that they're being meritorious. They're really trying to further their education. And then, you know, this is a great reward for them, you know.
so it's, right, and, you know, it's based on need, so would be the attendance of those students who've been identified as
Yeah.
in need of,
Yeah, that way they come to school all the time.
right.
That's just an idea that flashed
No, I mean,
across.
we could
and
definitely look
I
into
thought I'd
that.
express it. Thank you. With that, I yield.
Thank you. Other questions, comments?
Mr. Mayor?
Mr.
Sorry,
Aguirre?
one additional thing. And the more I think of this, something like this is happening in a lot of places already throughout the schools. Teachers, teacher assistants, principals, they're taking care of some of these needs on their own. So I do want to say thank you to those folks that do that on a regular basis. This is going to help with that need, so they might have a resource to go to. But there is people already taking money out of their own pockets to take care of our families on a daily basis in our schools. The other thing I read, and I think it was in the old document, that they might donate backpacks and other types of things as well.
So there are some other goods.
Toothbrushes, something like that?
Yeah, there are some other goods that they will be providing. It all depends on their stock. So we had asked things like diapers, things like that, and that was not one of those items that originally they were thinking about. I think that they are thinking about things like
Right,
that
and
now,
if you hear from
hygiene
the-
products.
If you hear from the schools they need X supplies, we can
Right.
figure out a way to get some of those supplies so
Exactly.
that people don't. With that, I yield. Thank you.
Just, again, a clarifying question. I mean, in this document, it says that it will be operated by student volunteers who will pack and then distribute the food to their classmates. Again, I still really believe, I mean, even going forward, maybe this is just a lesson for the department and the school committee to just kind of get into the habit of involving some of these youth a little bit more. You know, we used to have the saying, voice and a choice. I mean, this is important. This is in their school. And to not have them weigh in on a signage and just have this committee vote on the signage, I think is not right. I think that the school, in some form or fashion, really should weigh in. The students should weigh in some way. And I still am not clear on the operational piece, because this document tells us that students will pack and distribute the food to their classmates, unless this document is incorrect. But that does allow the opportunity for potential students to know who their classmates are. Now, granted, some of those may be in elementary school that they don't know if that food is being sent to an elementary school, but there are certainly students at Durfee that will be involved in the program.
Right. I think, Mr. Chairman, I think what can happen, if that's a logistical piece, is it could be a number. So the students would never know, number one, and then the sheet on the other end at the school would be, number one is student X.
No, that's
I
fine,
think
but that's
that
just
that
not
may be
here.
a way
That's
to,
not
you're
clear,
right.
So we're
yeah.
voting on something that's not clearly
Exactly.
stated. It's we don't have that clarity. And you never know, maybe a student comes up with a more creative name than food pantry, citywide grocery, who knows? I just think it's really important that we involve, students in these processes if it's going to be in the school that they have to look at every single day. So I won't be supporting this because tonight's agenda item is specifically about the sign. I am in big-time support of the pantry itself, which we have voted on already in the past meetings, but in terms of the sign, I just think that student involvement is really important. If it's going to be physically in the school and they're going to have to look at it every day, I think they should be involved. So with that, if there are no other questions or comments, Mr. Martins?
On the reference that the chair has stated here, it says the students will pack and then distribute. I thought you had indicated a few moments ago that it would be distributed to the families by couriers.
So they'll be putting it on a cart. We're not going to have students drive to the Green School or to Laterno or to Cuss. They'll be setting them up by school, and then they will be distributed by our nutrition workers who deliver food to those schools every day.
Okay, so the students are only going to pack.
Yes, package.
They are not going to distribute.
No.
Thank you. Are you?
Okay, roll call.
Mr. Aguirre?
Yes.
Mr. Coogan?
Yes.
Mr. Costa?
Yes.
Mr. Hetzler? Mr. Corey?
Yes.
Mr. Martins?
Yes.
Mayor Correa?
No. Item number 6, discussion and vote to approve transportation bids. Is there a motion to approve the new transportation bids?
So moved.
Motion has been made to
Second.
approve. That has been seconded. Questions, comments from the committee? Mr. Aguirre?
Yeah, just a brief comment about the process. I've had a lot to say about, as we went through the process, that it was a mess. Ultimately, I'm thankful that we got to the resolution here at the end that was very close to the overall number. I was disheartened relative to the vans from Tremblay's. I stated at 2 meetings ago, we should have approved this. They came in at around $800,000 or $900,000 increase. The other ones came in lower, so we kind of balanced out. But in the future, I hope that as things progress like that, more communication happens from the school administration to the school committee so that we can get to the bottom of, the pros and cons of an issue rather than wait till the last minute. But I do want to thank Mr. Pacheco for his patience and badgering, if you want to call it that, at many meetings that I personally gave to him. But I think at the end, we're all better off for what happened. And now in the future, we know how to do it maybe a little more efficiently with hope that we'll have further savings in the future. So with that, I'll be supporting this. Thank you. I yield.
Mr. Corey?
Yeah, I want to thank the committee for revisiting this very important issue. It was almost a divisive issue when it came up, and it was very sensitive. But clearly, we set our sights on promoting the right thing. The right thing to do was to look at the costs, draw back, and come in with a more efficient level. And it's been done. And for that, I commend all the work that's been done. There was a lot of pressure on Mr. Pacheco. There was a lot of pressure on the contractors. And so I know the contractors, I hope they're happy. I know that we're happy. And so with that, I yield. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and from the city's perspective, I think it's important that everyone here on the committee and on the school department is made aware that, it was never our intention to slow down the process, but in fact just get it right, which is why the process ended in this way. I too want to thank the superintendent and his staff for working with us. I don't know if it was confusion, I don't know what it was, but I think that the process definitely needs some improvement going forward. This particular scenario that we have now in front of us, I think will ultimately still benefit the school department and the city in partnership. Because it is a breathing year for us, it gives us 1 year to really nail down the different routes with the route software. It gives us the ability to really see what's happening in our district, which is ever changing and ever improving. And I think it really will give us a solid foundation for a future bid. I do still believe, and I just want to remind the committee of this, that we do need to continue to search for ways of leverage over private bus contractors. What I mean by that is if we cannot provide our own alternatives, whether it be in-house buses, whether that be leasing, whether it be certain contracts for just drivers, for example, if we cannot provide that data during proposals and during bids, then we really are flying blind when it comes to getting the responses from the bidders. So it's really, really important that we do that. And I know I've had those discussions with Mr. Pacheco as well as the superintendent, but I wanted to be on the record with the committee that the city is very interested in looking at those alternatives to continue to drive down the cost of transportation while still improving the service of transportation to students and families. So I think that this vote takes a huge step in the right direction, and I want to thank my committee members in advance for supporting that decision ultimately in the end. Mr. Coogan.
I got one question. Kenny, when does next year's, if we approve this tonight, when does next year start for you guys?
We'll probably ramp up in October.
October? Using all of the cost savings incorporated this year?
And we'll also have a lot of the data, new data from the software.
Yeah, because I mean, obviously we got through it and we're going to do a 1-year contract, but going forward, I do prefer the 5-year contracts for everybody up here so we can lock these people in.
You and me both.
Using some of the explorative type of things that the mayor's saying for long-term savings. You got to support it. I yield.
Also to note, Mr. Coogan, you bring up a good point. 5 years, keep in mind, this committee's edification, that a 5-year contract always will need city council approval, right? So to lock in those long-term savings, you have to keep that in mind as well. So when we went to the council, of course, they were not very thrilled with $11.9 million, which was the original number, which I think started kind of that process at the joint meeting. So, kudos to the joint meeting that's now in the charter, because I think that's what started this awakening, so to speak, regarding transportation this particular year. But it is important to realize that, 5-year contracts need to go to the council. 3 years and less, this committee can approve. There was a question on this side, Mr. Costa? Mr.
I'm
Costa?
not sure if he yielded.
Yep, he yielded,
All
yeah.
right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not sure if it needs a motion. If it does, I can certainly wait till the one that's on the table is disposed of, but I really think that there needs to be some clarification by our legal counsel in terms of what authority this committee has to approve contracts. In this particular situation, we approved the contract, at least for the Tremblay's portion of the transportation. It then later went down, was approved by, I believe the city council weighed in on it. They may not have, but ultimately the process stalled in the mayor's office because he was the final authority to sign off on it. So I really think at some point, and again, if it needs a motion, I can ask for one, but I really think we need some clarification. It's my understanding that the committee as a body, if we approve contracts and we send them down, if the ultimate authority on these contracts is the mayor's office and his signature, then why do we need to be involved in it? Why don't we just take the issue and send it down to the administration and let them decide whether or not they want to sign off on that contract? And so I really think there needs to be some feedback given to this committee in the form of a legal opinion with respect to what our authority is and whether or not, if this committee does take action to approve contracts, that are those contracts then need to be executed, or is there a process which can ultimately be decided by the administration to not sign them? And if so, does that need to come back to us with notification that there's an issue, that so we may be able to rectify that? The process needs to be better ironed out, because if the Tremblay's contract as originally approved by this committee had been signed, it would have been a 5-year contract for $800,000 a year less than what we have this contract. This one's almost $800,000 more for 1 year. And so I think we would have had a better value by going out for 5 years with Tremblay at $800,000 less a year than we're getting this time around. And my colleague brought up a good point. Because of the ebb and flow and the bids in the other areas, it came in closer to what our overall number was going to be. But in that particular one, we had the opportunity to lock up Tremblay for 5 years for services at $800,000 less a year. That's a significant savings to the taxpayers of Fall River. So I know it's not an expenditure out of our budget, but it certainly is out of an appropriation that's made by the city. I can't imagine that that the city council would have balked at a 5-year contract for Tremblay. But in any event, if, Mr. Chairman, if you feel a motion's needed, I'll wait until this one's disposed of. I'm just looking for some clarification, a legal opinion, so that we have on record what our legal authority is when it comes to contracts. If it is the process that we can vote on them, they get sent down, your office or future mayor's office administration can look at them and decide whether or not they want to sign them. That's fine. I just think we need some clarification as to what our authority is as a school board and a school body when it comes to responsibilities of expenditures, on contracts. So with that, I yield.
So on that particular point, just so that we're clear and we're just giving the public the right information, clear information, Mr. Pacheco, the Tremblay's contract for the vans, you had negotiated those contracts down, correct?
No, those contracts were sitting, Tremblay's was, I'm sorry. So the contract was set in stone, and the only thing that we had asked Tremblay's after the fact was if there were any reductions. He did reduce that contract by 150,000.
So that contract was reduced?
Yes.
Okay. It was determined that because it was competitively put out originally, that contract could not be signed. Is that correct?
That's what we were told.
Okay. So I just want to make it very clear to the public that that particular contract was not a legal binding contract.
Just
Mr. Vice Chair, if I could just finish for a second. I let you
absolutely.
speak. I have the floor now.
Absolutely.
So that particular contract was not a legally binding contract, could not be signed by my office through the purchasing agent. We've gone through this several times. So, yeah, it was a great deal. We would have loved to lock it in for 5 years, but it was ultimately determined not by my office, but in conjunction with Attorney Assad, the superintendent, yourself, Mr. Pacheco, and our office, as well as the Attorney General's office, that contract could not be legally binding. That's number one. Number two, the reason that it's $800,000 more for 1 year, my understanding, and Mr. Pacheco, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but you're the one that told me this, is that they cannot accurately predict within that 1 year what's going to happen with all the buses, where if it was a 5-year, they could spread that risk. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so that's the second point. And then finally, in terms of contracts, while this particular contract could only be approved or not approved by my office, and I think it's the right policy, is because this contract is paid by the city. The other contracts we approved tonight, which were vast, are approved by this committee because they are school department expenses. Transportation, as everyone on this table knows, is a city expense. It is not net school spending eligible. We do not get reimbursed for the majority of school transportation. Therefore, because it's a city contract that we pay, the city has the ability, through the mayor, to reject and not sign those contracts. All the additional contracts tonight were approved by this committee because they're paid by the school department. Those are the answers to the questions that were just brought up. And Mr. Costa, if you want the floor back, you're more than welcome, but I think it's important that we give accurate information, not clouded information. Mr. Costa.
So I'll just clarify that. Your office didn't even know about Attorney Assad's opinion or the IG's ruling on this until after you decided not to sign it.
No, the purchasing agent, the purchasing agent
We're
made it
going
very
to
clear.
talk facts here, Mr. Mayor. We're going to talk
Purchasing
facts
agent-
because I had a meeting in your office where you weren't even aware of a decision that was going to be made by the IG. The reason it got reduced by 150,000 is that you proclaimed that we weren't going to spend that amount on transportation. Your decision to not sign it didn't come with the information that you just shared today. It happened to work out that way, but you found your office had already decided not to sign this contract that we had approved long before Attorney Assad got involved and long before the IG made its ruling, and long before Mr. Pacheco was tasked with going back and asking these companies, to reduce the amount of their bids. This was a process that was bid, the number came in, the contract was approved, it went to your office, your administration and your purchasing agent sat on that contract.
Excuse me, they
It
did not
wasn't
sit
until,
on the
hold on,
contract.
Mr. Chair, I'll let you have the floor back, in fairness. But to say that your office didn't sign it because the IG had already ruled that because we went back and reduced it, it was the right thing to do, your office didn't know that until after the fact. It was long after the time period had expired for the contract to actually be signed, which was 73 days, Attorney Assad?
I don't have it offhand.
In any event, that time had already expired. So to sit here today and say the justification for not signing it was that it was a bad contract is not accurate. It was a good contract when it got to you until you proclaimed we weren't going to spend that money on transportation, and then Mr. Pacheco went back to renegotiate these bids with these companies.
Which could not be
It was at
done.
that point that he found and realized some savings, and at that time, it became an issue where people raised that there was a significant change in the bid process and that it wasn't going to be fair to other vendors. And it was at that point the IG got involved and said, correct, given that information, it's probably not a good bid. But it wasn't until after your office had decided not to sign it. So that's point number one. Point number three, you're right, I agree with you. I didn't write down what your second point was, but at least your third point, I will say this. If that's the case, then Attorney Assad's legal opinion is going to clarify for all of us whether or not we have to be involved in the the approval of transportation contracts. And you may be right, Mr. Chair. I don't know. I'm asking for the legal opinion so that we're all on the same page, because I agree. If it's not a school department expenditure, then why are we spending our time on the school side going out for bids, handling the bid specs, collecting the bids, putting these information together only to vote on it, to send it to your administration and the city council where you ultimately could say, we're not spending that amount. Just take us out of that piece. It's not our expenditure, it's not our contracts, not our funds. Let the city take care of their piece. But again, I think that'll be vetted, and certainly Attorney Assad will be able to tell us whether or not there's a legal authority that has to be put on us to make those decisions. But that's my recollection of it, Mr. Chairman. I'm not sure I want to, go back and forth all night with you. I've said my piece on it. I really feel as though the contract, when it went down, for the amount it went down for, was a good contract. I think we should have taken the opportunity to sign off on it. My understanding of it, when we had that meeting in your conference room, was that your purchasing agent had an issue with vendors being confused by the process. Not that there was anything in accordance with 30B that was violated. A lot of the specific examples that I asked for was that there was a lot of confusion. It kept asking for additional information. And we kept providing that additional information right up until the bids were to be closed. That was my understanding. At no time did we have any discussions about your office not signing it because the IG said that it would be a bad
Well,
contract to
those
sign.
calls had not been taking place at that time. You are correct, but those calls were have been taken place by the school department. It was on the school department to get the transportation contract signed and done correctly. It was ultimately determined, you can say that it worked out that way in my favor, whatever you want to call it, but it was ultimately determined that whatever was done to meet the number that I consistently have said, we spent 9.3 last year. The city is not going to entertain something higher than 9.3 to tip our hand to potential bidders. It was the school department's determination that they would go down and try and negotiate those bids down, which ultimately was not possible. So that's how it played out, and as I've stated, I think the entire process was flawed. I think it needs to be revamped, relooked at, and done in a much more efficient and productive manner going forward. I'm happy that we have what we have tonight, because otherwise we'd be sitting here spending an additional $2 million a year for the next 5 years, which totals $10 million that can be spent on numerous other things like police and fire and additional stuff for our school department. So this process ultimately did work out in the entire city's favor, but I think it needs to be revamped going forward. And with that, I'll yield, and I know there's a couple other members that want to speak on this issue. Mr. Martins.
I want to speak on that issue, that's all water under the dam. But on the issue of the transportation, just for clarification, especially for those that perhaps are watching, the total amount is $10,145,578. Is that correct?
Of which 9 million...
I'll get to that.
Oh, okay.
That's
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. Of that amount, $9,990,265.60 is a city expense.
Yes,
Not net school spending eligible.
yes.
And there is $155,312.50, which is the school department expense, which is net school spending eligible.
Yes.
Thank you very much, I yield.
Thank you. Other questions, comments? Roll call. Oh, Mr. Aguirre?
Just one comment, and I don't want to belabor the point about what happened during the bids, but let's make no mistake about it. From last year to this year, the bids went up over $1 million to transport the same number of students. So that's an issue. And that's why I think we've got to keep working at it. We have to look into purchasing more vans, getting some of our own people. All of those things, I'm more than willing to support those now when we have a little bit of extra budget money than waiting and figure it out. So whatever great ideas you come up with, Mr. Pacheco, please bring them to the committee so we can support it. With that, I yield.
Thank you. Roll call.
Mr. Agia?
Yes.
Mr. Coogan?
Yes.
Mr. Costa?
No.
Mr. Hetzler? Mr. Corey?
Yes.
Mr. Martins?
Yes.
Mayor Correa?
Yes. Item number 7
Mr.
is
Chair,
the...
may I?
Mr.
I'd like to
Costa.
make a motion for the committee's consideration to ask legal counsel to provide a legal opinion with respect to the authority of the school committee when it comes to approving contracts, both for funds expended by the school department and also for contracts that may include funding outside of the school department's budget, i.e. transportation for transportation funding.
Motion has been made. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. Questions, comments? Roll call.
Mr. Agia?
Yes.
Mr. Coogan?
Yes.
Mr. Costa?
Yes.
Mr. Hetzler? Mr. Corey?
Yes.
Mr. Martins?
Yes.
Mayor Correa?
Yes. Item number 7 is discussion vote to approve the nutritional bids. Is there a motion to approve?
Make a motion.
Motion has been made. Is there a second?
Second with a question?
Second with a question. Mr. Aguirre, you have the floor.
So on the financial proposal on page 2, second paragraph, it reads, "We guarantee the food service program will operate profitably at a surplus of $1 million." And when I look at that, I know we've been over this before. My belief is that benefits should be included when we're looking at making statements like this. Am I right to assume that this doesn't include any of the benefits as we've discussed before?
Nothing has changed since the last time we discussed it.
Right. So, I mean, there was only one bidder. There really is no option here for us to go to another person, but at the same time, I, for one, member, don't like the idea of using terminology like we're going to operate at a surplus, when in essence, in reality, we're not at $1 million surplus. Take the benefits out. If we are going to be a surplus, then take the benefits out. Stop arguing with us every time we want to talk about it. Take the benefits that come in out of that fund, and we can therefore use that money as we've discussed in the past. The committee went on record supporting a motion that I had made to try our best to get to self-sustainability. I do think that should still be an option. So I'm going to vote for this, but I would like to get some further update, maybe just an update of the documents that we had before related to how much money is here and what we can do, because at the end of the day, I think the goal should be self-sustainability. And when a vendor can come in and make a statement that we guarantee the program will operate at a surplus of $1 million, I'd like to call them on it, personally. With that, I yield.
Thank you. Other questions? Roll call.
Mr. Agia?
Yes.
Mr. Coogan?
Yes.
Mr. Costa?
Yes.
Mr. Hetzler? Mr. Corey?
Yes.
Mr. Martins?
Yes.
Mayor Correa?
Yes. Item number 8 is discussion vote to approve salary ranges for principals. Is there a motion? No motion to approve? No?
Motion made.
Motion's been made. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Second.
Okay, second. It looks like there might be some questions. Mr. Aguirre?
Yeah, so on the memo, one of the first things that I see is the principal salary ranges. I have no problem voting on those today. I would want to take the others off the table because those are all individual contracts, assistant superintendent, CFO, COO. Those don't necessarily, in my opinion, need to be arranged, so I'd like to take those off of the table so we can actually discuss the principal ranges, which is the most important piece. So I'd like to make a first amendment to eliminate those other 4 from the discussion so that we can actually focus on the principals today. I'd like to make that as an amendment.
Form of amended motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. Roll call on the amendment.
May I just?
Yep, Mr.
Thank you, Mr.
Costa.
Chairman. Can I ask, through you, Mr. Chairman, to the superintendent, what the purpose for bringing the assistant superintendent, COO, CFO, and human resource directors forward at this point, given those are individual contracts?
Just for the ranges, whenever we have to post them, someone asks what the ranges are that we have.
So if we need to have further discussion on it, tonight's vote to not include those is not going to
No,
hamper
we
your
don't-
way?
we don't need to include them
People still
because
under contract? We don't
There's
have anybody-
no issues affecting that as of right now.
Nobody's contract is going to be expiring within the next 30 days, so that
One gets close, but not right now.
we still have some time to...
Yes.
Okay. With that, I yield.
Thank you. Other questions on the motion to amend? Roll call on the motion to amend.
Mr. Agia?
Yes.
Mr. Coogan?
Yes.
Mr. Costa?
Yes.
Mr. Hetzler? Mr. Corey?
Yes.
Mr. Martins?
Yes.
Mayor Correa?
Yes. Mr. Aguirre, you still have the floor.
Yes, so I do support a different range, and the reason why is that if you look at the data and the information that we have currently in our system, we have situations where we have assistant principals in a building based on the union contract with a salary scale that pays them in some cases more, in some cases very close to the principal's pay. And I think that that's an issue relative to the level of responsibility and the expectations of the principals, that there should be a range or some sort of an increase above what a vice principal makes and the principal. We have ranges that are all over the place. We have one situation where a principal makes $9,000 less than one of the vice principals. We have some that make $100 more or less. All of those things, I think, need to be corrected. And although when you look at the dollar figures, seems like a lot of money in the $100,000 ranges, but in reality of working in a school and in the systems, you have to pay people to get the best candidates for these jobs that are high pressure, burnout jobs that these people are working hours and hours and hours. To pay them almost the same as a vice principal makes me sometimes wonder who the heck in their right mind wants to be a principal? When for a few grand less, you can be in the union and actually, make almost the same amount of money and have, more time off. These people work full-time during the year. Everybody works hard, but the principals are on call all the time. They're working under tremendous pressure, so I think we need to address that. The other piece that I think needs to be addressed is that we have schools that are in extended learning time. Some people get more, some people don't. Well, what happens when the person is not in extended learning time, but they're working their tail off more hours than the person that is in? It takes the wind out of the sails of principals. It really, we have to do a better job of figuring out what we're going to pay people and pay them appropriately. And I think that the way the jobs are going nowadays, we have 3 openings here, 3 different levels, elementary, middle, and high school. I think the elementary and middle should be all the same, in the same range. Because we have elementary schools with 700 kids, 600 kids, that the principals are working as hard with more or the same stress at least as the middle school. So I would want to make 2 ranges, one for the elementary and middle together, and one for the high school and alternative ed principals. My last point is, I do think that based on my comments related to the contracts, a basic top step vice principal without any additions makes $104,395. That's what a top step person would make. It's my position and my belief that any principal should make at least $10,000 more as a floor for their salary range. So if $104,000 is the amount that basically a vice principal is going to be making, I think $10,000 more than that should be the floor. So rather than the elementary and middle be 100 to 115 or 105 to 125, I'd like to make an amendment that it's $114,395 as the floor and keep the same range, $20,000 difference.
Make that in the form of a motion?
I'm making that in the form of a motion. So it would read $114,000 as the floor to whatever 20,000 on top of that would be. So 134 was 104 plus the 20, so 124, 125.
Is there a second? No seconds? Okay, hearing no second, the motion does not carry.
So based on what these are facts. I'm laying out the facts for you here. And we can say what we want. We can say, let's just support this, which I will at a very minimal support this. But if anybody on this committee, if anyone on this committee read the document that the superintendent gave us related to the amount of salaries and the differences between the VPs, the regular principals, and just the general inequities throughout this document. And it's no fault of the superintendent, it's no fault of anybody's, but I think we, as a school committee, have to try and correct it. If anybody on this committee thinks that the document that we got is appropriate, then don't support any of the other things I suggested. But I don't see how anybody that actually read these documents will say that they think that that's okay.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Vice Chair.
I'm okay with my colleague taking a stance on an issue, but to browbeat his colleagues for not supporting his position, I just think it's completely inappropriate. He made his motion, didn't get a second.
What's
We're
the
back
point
to
of
the main
clarification?
motion. So it's not a point of clarification, it's a point of order.
I have
I'm
a right,
okay with
I have
you
a right
making-
to say what I want to say.
You don't have the right to badger or browbeat your colleagues to not take the position you want us to take. That's all I'm saying. With that, I yield.
Thank you. Mr. Aguirre, you still have the floor.
Yeah, so along the way, I just think it's not accurate, and basically, it's just not right to have one person making $9,000 less than their vice principal, another person making $113 less. Some make $1,000 more, some make $2,000 more. It's an issue. We can choose to not address it. That's the role of this committee. I think it's the wrong move. I do think we need to have a floor, and if anyone was being honest, looking at the data, I don't see how anybody can support anything otherwise. With that, I yield.
Thank you. Mr. Coogan.
What subcommittee reviewed this?
No.
None. Well, I'd make a second motion then. Obviously, I did look at some of the data, and it didn't include New Bedford and a few other towns. I'd like this to be referred to whichever subcommittee would handle this and study it for a way to do it. My concern in not supporting my colleague is the amount of jumps some of these people are going to get, boom, boom, boom. Although I believe on point Kevin's advocating for something that we want across the district, fairness, I think it might be a little too quick to do it all in one swipe. And I have no problem looking at this in a subcommittee. I hope you send it to one of mine and talk to a few principals and get some data, and let's look at this. But I think what he's advocating for on some of these jumps is quite substantial. I don't believe he's also taking into account the longevity of the people that are making money at or above those principals. Now, some of the principals, and again, one of the ones he had referred to, has been a principal for one year. I was a vice principal, so I know that people come in at different levels, and that's fine. But I think if this went to a subcommittee and we looked at a way to do it over a few years, it might be more palatable. But jumping people like that without any regards to longevity or how long people have been in the district might be something that we could factor in at a subcommittee level and see where we go.
The superintendent would like to weigh in.
So my original request is a small jump, which is what we did 2 years ago. And the reason being is it's July, and principals haven't gotten any increases, and I've been able to negotiate the new hires within the current ranges. But we have other principals who are at the edge. And you can see, based on the median across the state, I'm not even proposing to get to the median. We're below that. I mean, it's a travesty that we pay so little. I agree with Mr. Aguirre on that. Maybe if the committee would allow that we approve what was requested with the caveat to fix the bigger issues that have been raised, to go back to subcommittee and spend many more months really trying to figure out and untap, and maybe there is a place for size of school, et cetera, like Brockton, the way that Brockton funds their principals, turnaround level, et cetera. They get additional dollars for those kinds of special programs. But at the same time, I have to contract before the start of the school year with several of our current principals whose contracts end, and I need to secure those, and I'm concerned that I won't be able to secure those in the current range. So what I'm asking the committee is the leeway to be able to do what I need to do at a modest just extension of the salary range is a temporary first step to solve a current problem, but then come back, as Mr. Coogan articulated, come back and spend more lengthy time in subcommittee really figuring out a fix. And people need to understand this is work that systems probably do every 10 years or so to get things right as union contracts increase and individual contracts don't. So that split between a 10-month employee and a 12-month employee, when you think about the hours, it really doesn't make sense. So I think he's got a point. Mr. Aguirre's got a really good point, and I agree with Mr. Coogan, but I would request that the committee consider my request for a small shift on the north end of the range temporarily so I can secure those positions and then go back to the subcommittee and fix it in the long haul.
Thank you. You yield, Mr. Coogan?
Yeah, I yield.
Mr. Costa?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The reason I didn't support the amendment to the motion is because I agree it is a huge jump, and I think some people are going to get a considerable bump, $10,000, $14,000 a year. I'm not so sure that this committee wants to take action on that. I'm okay with the modest increase you're asking for, Mr. Superintendent. But the reality is that the committee sets the range. You as a superintendent go in these negotiations with your principals and decide what to offer them. So
correct.
You're the one holding the cards, and you're the one holding the exact pay that these individuals are getting paid.
Yes.
So as Mr. Aguirre's pointed out, and aptly so, if you have people who are getting paid more as a vice principal than you do principals, then that's on you, because you negotiated those salaries within those ranges. That's not this committee.
Well, vice principals are through the FRAA. It's a salary scale.
Right. So it was negotiated. But what I'm saying is that you knew the range of negotiations that vice principals were going to get paid. All I'm saying is that this information, if it was needed to secure people, should have been brought to this committee a lot sooner.
Well, we do it every July. I promised the committee 2 years I'd come back in 2 years at this time. So we did it 2 years ago.
Right. So let me ask you this. So these increases you factor in, are they in your FY20 budget?
Yes.
And during any of the budget process and the finance subcommittees that we had during the FY20 building process, I don't recall you or anybody or Mr. Almeida sharing with this committee that you were going to propose bringing back
We very clearly said that we put in
a $5,000 increase for principals?
no, we said we put in a 2% increase. 2% equals about that. So you have to understand the ranges. Just because they increased by $5,000 doesn't mean someone gets $5,000.
Right. But it gives you that latitude to give them if you feel like they're warranted, based on longevity, the type of school they're in.
If it's a new contract. Current existing contracts would only be by the percentage that the committee approves, up to 2%.
Okay. So, again, I'm okay with the salary ranges you brought forward. They look like they're about a $5,000 bump on the backside.
On the extension.
Right, on the backside.
And I'm not saying that people would get there, but it's in terms of where my people are now, whose contracts end. I have many that are at that 109 figure at the elementary level who just finished 3 years of a contract and they're doing a great job and they're ready to recontract. And I don't think I can recontract them for the same pay. So that's what I was asking for, the
You think they're
ability.
going to walk on us?
Huh?
You think they're going to
Well,
walk
I
on us?
think they deserve it.
No, I'm not saying they don't deserve it.
But I mean, I think we have to treat them as
I think
professionals.
we can also, right, and I think we can step this back and have further discussion on these ranges to make sure that it's more equitable and that we don't have people who are vice principals getting paid more than people who are principals.
But that's going to take us about a year to fix.
Okay.
And so, but I need some leeway right now.
Right, and I've said it, I'm willing to support what's
okay.
before us now, to give you that latitude.
Yes.
I wasn't willing to support the $14,000,
Yeah,
I
I
believe,
hear
jump
you.
that was proposed earlier. I'm okay with what you have here as a proposed increase. It's $5,000, and if you have people, and it's 2%, then I think that's fair. If they've been doing a good enough job to warrant a 2% increase, then we'll give you that range to do that. But I don't like taking votes on proposals that are made from the floor, just off the cuff, like, well, let's just add this, or let's add that, because those have ramifications down the road. And so I'd rather step it back, send it to a subcommittee, look at the increases, make sure it's equitable and fair for the work that's being done, and if it's in conflict with what someone's making who is part of a union, then maybe we need to adjust the salary scale so that doesn't happen. Inevitably, I've said this for many years while on this committee, as soon as those salaries increase, guess what happens? The other four that you have there, they have to increase, because then you start having principals and vice principals making more than your administration, and that has never happened. So that always goes up. And so, again, this year I think we've appropriated for 100% of net school spending. So we're at what's minimally required, and yet we're going to talk about continuing to launch the salary structure higher and higher. So I'll support it as it is before us now with that short increase, and then we can talk further, I guess, at a subcommittee or a future school committee meeting as to where those salary ranges go. With that, I yield.
Thank you. Mr. Martins.
Thank you. I have never been intimidated by threats of, if I don't get this salary, I'm going to go elsewhere. I have witnessed in this school system and in other school systems that the grass on the other side of the fence isn't greener. So I don't subscribe to threats. This increase is approximately 5% in there. And with it being with a 5% increase from the current low to the proposed low and the current high to the proposed high, what is the percentage of increase that was granted for the FRAA, FREA, and other unions?
2%.
2%. Now, I heard tonight for all of those unions, correct? For FRAA, FREA, and the other unions that we have. You said 2%?
Yes,
For all of them?
for this fiscal year.
Okay, all right. I look at this and say, okay, and I've gone through the analysis of all of these towns and whatnot, and guess what? I don't really care about what the other towns and communities are paying. I'm looking at what Fall River can pay. Family of 4 is that earns a mean income of about $36,000 for a family of 4. These salaries are considerably higher than that. I'm not finished, you can rebut in there. My concern, however, you sent a memo about now having a dream team, which is great. I'm waiting to see, even though this dream team isn't responsible for the MCAS results of 19. They will be responsible for the MCAS results of 20. I'm waiting to see what those amounts are. A measure of the, not only, I know, and every, it's said this evening, it's been repeated many, many times, that the administration, central administration, the school administration, the faculties, they work their butts off, and I agree, they do. But the only thing is, what's the results? What are the results? And we'll soon find out come about October, when the 19 MCAS results come about, and then I'll be back again and saying, hey, wait a minute, where's the improvement on the MCAS results, all right, in there, and how do you go about, especially in the elementary grades, right, in there, more money does not necessarily mean that you're going to have an increase in student learning, but certainly additional people in the classroom, especially in the elementary, where that's the building blocks of going on to middle and then going on to high school, that they indeed need additional help. Now, if you get more an increase in student performance at the elementary grades that then feeds into the middle and the high school, that does tend to make the job of the administrations at the various levels a little bit easier in there. I will support this. I'll tell you I don't like the fact that, hey, wait a minute, 5% for one group and only 2% for the other. And I know that's collective bargaining, absolutely so, and that's what was bargained, okay, fine. And that's what's paid in there. But a 5% increase versus a 2% increase, I think this amount of money that is being proposed here is adequate. I like ranges, and I like the idea of having the superintendent being able to say, okay, if it's within this range, you did very well, we can give you a little bit more, you haven't done very well, so therefore you're either going to be the same or you only get slightly more. And with that, I yield.
Thank you. Mr. Corey.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Superintendent, I think with all of the commentary speaks to the depth of our school committee. I think a lot of great points have just been brought up over this issue, and I'm really glad that we have a school committee, a school board that vets the issue that closely. It's great. With that, I think about our district, our community, its people, our staff, our personnel, and the health and wealth of our school system. So I know that we've talked about teacher retention so much in the past. I hope in some way that we can begin to develop administrative retention as well, because I think that having a steady hand ever present in a school building always helps that building to turn around. I think the steady hand, instead of the constant changeover of personnel that we see, not only in this district, but in education in general, that disturbs me. When I became an educator early in my career, I made a commitment to stay in Fall River for the health and wealth of the community. And I think that maybe we can look at ways to incubate and to develop within our own an intent for commitment to our local district, commitment to our district to stay at a school through the hard times, through the difficult MCAS numbers, and to make that school more steady, more moral, stronger from the inside out. And so if this salary range is going to help us to develop consistency and commitment in our administrative personnel, then I would be in favor of this. I would just off the cuff, Mr. Superintendent, our average length of service for principals in general, speaking strictly in general, is it 2 years, 4 years, 6 years? What is it? What's the average length?
So it's somewhere between 2 to 6 years right now, in terms of the longer-serving principals that we have.
Yeah.
But the good news is that we haven't had much turnover the last 2 years. So we've been able, I think, to strike a balance and hire. And I just want to correct the record. There's no one threatening anything about leaving. It's a question of us having the ability to be flexible. So I don't want anyone to think that someone's like threatening to go somewhere else. It's just at the time of the year, and folks get really anxious if I'm not able to contract them with them before the start of the year. And we do involve, of course, Mr. Assad through that process. So I think that the more that we're able to understand this issue and figure out what appropriate compensation packages are for the work that's done in the schools, the better off we'll be able to be in the long run in terms of what you've articulated around that culture and folks sticking with the district.
Sticking with the district. I saw something last month in the newspaper that sees where Professor Armin Damaris, Professor Emeritus Armin Damaris came to, and he's running workshops at Durfee and building master's candidates within our own district. That's an incubator. That's healthy. That's growth and development. If we can take this moment and develop loyalty like that, commitment like that, I think it's just going to make our district better overall. And I know that we're a gateway district. We're at net school spending limits. I realize all of that, so we have to work within strong limitations. When we can develop loyalty, commitment to the district, then we're developing a healthy district. So I will support this, Mr. Superintendent, because I think it's necessary at this day and age with the high cost of living. And as my committee member colleague here so aptly said, the pressures of the principals are intense at the ground level. And thank you. With that, I yield.
Thank you. Mr. Aguirre.
Just a question on the extended learning time. I'm of the belief that that should fall within the range. So if we set a range for elementary principal of right now it's 110,000 on an individual contract. I'm of the belief that entire salary needs to fall within that range.
That's not correct. So the process that I inherited when I came here is that for the 90 minutes ELT, there's $10,000 paid for out of the grant for the 90 minutes per day for the principal. And then if you have 20 minutes, 30 minutes, or 60 minutes ELT, it's a ratio of that 90. Half of it is guaranteed, and the other half is based on achievement metrics that were similar to what Mr. Martin's articulated.
I think that would need to just be clarified personally. So when we look at it...
ELT is outside of these contract ranges.
Yeah, I get it. But the principal's contract is an individual contract signed by you with them. So I think in our individual discussions, which wouldn't be happening here relative to the range, I think there's ways that we can fix some of these inequities individually, and that wouldn't be a discussion for above about talking about an individual contract. So I think some of the issues that I brought up, I think can at some point be looked at individually to try and correct this situation. When you increase it up to the 115, I think you're still kind of up against the, I guess we could approve this range, and then individually, if it had to go above it, we could still approve that? Like which?
We could, but what I'm asking the committee to do is approve this for now as a stopgap for us to do much more deep work that Mr. Coogan articulated, to be able to come back to committee with a proposal that's really comprehensive, but it will take us a while to get that done.
Right. My last point in talking about why I think they need to be combined is that this committee, through negotiations with the administrators union, has no longer differentiated between a vice principal in elementary versus the middle school, and then soon it's going to be in the high school. So a vice principal is going to be a vice principal paid the same rate in all different schools under the contract. So the rationale for why I wanted to at least combine the elementary and middle together is because we've already done that through negotiations, that is a public record, for those vice principals in those particular schools. So it used to be that you'd get an elementary vice principal would be a rate, middle school would get a little more, high school would get a little more. They're going to all be the same, which is why I was quoting that number, which is going to make it's going to become a problem in more cases. So with that, I'd like to make another motion to just amend to eliminate the elementary and keep only the principal of the middle and elementary combined at the 105 to 125.
Motion has been made. Is there a second? No seconds? Motion does not move forward. Mr. Aguirre, you still have the floor.
I yield.
Thank you. Okay, seeing no further questions, roll call on the original vote to approve.
Mr. Agia?
Yes.
Mr. Coogan?
Yes.
Mr. Costa?
Yes.
Mr. Hetzel? Mr. Corey?
Yes.
Mr. Martins?
Yes.
Mayor Correa?
Yes. Item number 9 is discussion of vote to approve the Tiverton Memorandum of Understanding, the MOU.
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve has been made. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded. Questions? Mr. Aguirre?
You want Super first?
Superintendent,
I'll
would you
yield
like
to
to comment on it?
May I?
Yes, please.
I just want to thank the committee for all their advice and really looking at an issue deeply and coming to a point to really understand this issue. This is a real issue, and I want to thank Mr. Martins for being the first person to bring it forward, and I know Mr. Aguirre, Mr. Coogan, Mr. Corey, Mr. Costa, everyone's been involved, Mr. Hetzler, in terms of this discussion. It's really important to understand that we have a really good partnership now in place with the Tiverton Public Schools for the residents of the Saudi Pond area of Fall River, which is actually totally encompassed by the town of Tiverton, Rhode Island. The price point on a tuition MOU agreement is really something that's very proud of in terms of coming to a price point that makes sense for all of us. And as we move forward, I want to thank those families who have really been patient. And I know they were very concerned and worried that we would not be continuing this agreement, but this agreement now is formalized with an MOU and is a living document. We'll be able to continue to mold and shape as the years move forward. So with that, I hope that the committee will vote to accept this MOU.
Thank you. Mr. Aguirre?
So the question I had was looking at the MOU. One section talks about financing school choice. Is that just null and void, the 5,000?
Yeah, we use that terminology so that people understand what the legality of the mechanism is, but we set our own rate because it's a different state.
It's not, it's sort of there, but it...
Right, we just
the last
use,
page-
we wanted, the superintendent in Tiverton also comes from Massachusetts, so he and I speak that language in terms of what school choice means, so we wanted to use that language, but set our own rate, so that's what we agreed to.
Okay. The other question was, I know you said that it's going to come from students in a certain area of the town. Is that articulated here?
Yes.
So that we know that it's not just anybody that...
So if you look at the second paragraph of the MOU, It says, whereas wish to work together to allow the residents of Saudi Pond to attend in Tiverton schools. Now, I anticipate there may be some one-offs down the road that we would bring forward to the committee to discuss if there was some other scenario outside of this agreement. But this agreement is just for those kids. One side of the street is Fall River, and the other side is Tiverton. And the historic arrangement has been that those students who live on the Fall River side of that street have been going to the Tiverton schools, and we would pay a tuition payment at the end of the year, but it was arbitrary. Now we have a price point that's favorable to both parties and something that I think makes sense.
I mean, I'm not opposed to it. I think it might need to be clarified, because what a resident of Saudi Pond actually is, just to, what if 6 people moved in next week?
Well, right now, there's at least 2 current, and we know that there's another family that just had a couple kids, and we anticipate over the next few years that there'll probably be upwards of 6 or 7 kids that are in this category. The good news is, though, that this agreement is less than what it would cost to transport all those kids to the Fall River Public
Yeah,
Schools.
I mean, I do think it makes sense. I just want to make sure that we're covered so that it's not just adding up and adding up. If you think that legally binds us to controlling it,
And we can stop this at any point if it becomes unwieldy, and we can go back to the table and keep working on it. But I don't foresee it right now, but I do know that in the past, and I'm going back a few years now, though, but at times, there's probably been 10 students a year from that region that have been Tiverton students. But we've had a decrease in the number of families recently.
Yeah.
But, it could rise up, but we're not anticipating
and does the
that.
Tiverton get us out of when we vote for the school choice or not? Because this is another state, it's a totally separate.
Totally separate MOU.
Right.
It's just an agreement.
Yeah.
I talked to the state about how to do it. There are many communities that have these agreements across Massachusetts, and they said you treat it just like school choice in terms of sped kids or any of those things, and Tiverton's been very clear. If it's an IEP that they can handle, they're going to take those kids, but if it's something that requires an out-of-district placement, that would be on us.
Right. With that, I yield. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Coogan.
I have one question. Are we getting our reimbursement for these students?
Yes,
So that they're listed on our SACID number goes with
they
each
will
one of these
be,
kids?
yes.
I yield.
Thank you. Mr. Martins?
School choice is a state issue. A student that lives on Meridian Street cannot go to Tiverton Public Schools under the guise of school choice.
Right.
The issue is that you live in Fall River that surrounds Saudi Pond. One side of the street, as the superintendent indicated, is Fall River. The other side is Tiverton in there. And basically, it's a circle right around the pond. And there's only so much land that is there. And yes, a lot can be sold and a new family can buy in or buy that property, of which case that individual, that family, is a Fall River resident. And it is Fall River's responsibility to educate the children of that family. So as a result, the wording of school choice in here is easy to simply understand, but it is not applicable as far as anybody wanting to go to a Tiverton, Rhode Island school because of school choice. You have to be a family that resides in Fall River and the surrounds of Saudi Pond. With that, I yield.
Thank you. No other questions? Roll call.
Mr. Agia?
Yes.
Mr. Coogan?
Yes.
Mr. Costa?
Yes.
Mr. Hetzel? Mr. Corey?
Yes.
Mr. Martins?
Yes.
Mayor Correa?
Yes. Item number 10 is discussion and vote to approve Family Support Specialist job description. Is there a motion?
Make a motion?
Motion's been made and seconded. Is that a second, Mr. Coogan? Yep, seconded. Questions? Mr. Martins?
I have three. What is the proposed salary for this, even though it's grant, what is the proposed salary for this position? Approximately.
So I'm going to ask HR or Ann Dargan to come to the microphone, please.
I agree with you, you're right. Okay.
Thank you. The range would be between $25,000 and $30,000. And again, as you can see, employment is contingent on job performance, program needs, and funding.
And it's a proposed grant position.
We would be hoping to be able to apply for grant funds for this position. Oftentimes, when you apply for grants, they want to see the job description attached to the grant application. So that's what we're looking and hoping.
I understand that, but if the grant doesn't come about, what happens then?
Then, I mean, at that point in time, we'd have to look at what the needs are in the district and other funding sources.
Okay. Let's go back again. If there are no other funding sources, what's then?
Then it's a job description until such time as we could afford the position.
But then it become at that point in time, would become a budget position.
If that would be the decision to commit to this position, yes.
Okay, all right. Now, are there any other agencies that do the same thing here in Fall River?
This would be a part of our Family Community Engagement Center. So, you know, we're looking at someone that's bilingual but can assist with transitioning our students. So, yes, there are agencies that will help families complete the SNAP or the transitional assistance, but yet the referral, how to get to that place, how to access the information would be the role of the family support specialist.
Okay, but how does a student get to go to the family support specialist?
It would really be the families that are coming into the PACE Center, and the PACE employees, such as the family support specialist, would be working with them to network, to connect them to other agencies. We have a lot of students who are homeless, so when they are visiting the Family Engagement Center, either Mrs. Kudo or the family support specialist or somebody else at that center is able then to counsel and work with the family. So it really is the liaison to the families as opposed to the student. But the student benefits greatly because now they're going to be able to access additional services.
And, that same person in the parent office could very easily say, okay, you need help in there, and refer you or that family to Community Connections, People Incorporated, and other agencies that would do exactly the same thing that was being done here, or being requested in here. I don't see the urgent need for something that is already being done, in my opinion. In there, or that they can have access to. The people certainly need the help, I agree. But I don't think the school department should be the be-end and all-end of all of the family issues in there, when there are agencies that can help in there. And that this, whether it's a grant or whether it's on a budget, if it's a grant, then that money could be very readily used to purchase another paraprofessional for an academic, an elementary classroom.
Please.
I think the purpose of the job description is to create the role for this person originally. And as Dr. Dargan explained, we're going to be looking for grant funding for this. But many times, the families that need to access these services don't necessarily know their way around the city or whatever. And so the problem manifests itself in our schools. So our principals, our counselors, our support staff see the problem, begin to have a conversation with the family. That's a conversation that doesn't necessarily take place on the school grounds. So then what they'll do is they'll refer them over to the Parent Center. Under Ms. Kudo's management over the last year plus, what's happened is that family, the PACE Center, as we refer to it, the Community Engagement Center, has gone from a place where primarily we just do intake for students that are registering. It's become more of a resource for our families. So many times what happens is the schools will recognize an issue, refer the families towards the PACE Center. As Kudo's group will try to assist, and as they've seen the need, that's where this position has come from. So I think you need to sort of take a step back. While there are other agencies that do the actual work of the service provider, okay, this is something that's a resource to the families and really sort of triages and do it. That's why it's not an expensive position, and we're hoping to secure grant funding for it.
$25,000 to $30,000 is approximately two, well, with benefits, one paraprofessional in there. And what you just indicated, that indeed there are people at the Parent Center, that's referral from guidance counselors and whatnot, that can very easily know or transfer or ask the involvement of the agency that is indeed basically chartered to be able to do that. I don't understand why we need to duplicate a service that indeed is already provided or can be provided to new people that perhaps don't know, a new family coming in that perhaps wouldn't know the fact that, hey, there is help available. Someone coming in saying, I need housing, right, fine. Then there are agencies that provide that help for housing. The Southeast Center for Independent Living, which I had a part-time job in there, is readily available to help people. Mass Rehab, readily available to help people.
And we don't disagree with you at all, but we need that connection with the family to be able to help guide them. Many of them are just new to this country, new to Fall River, and we need to be able to make those connections. If we don't make those connections, it could potentially cost us twice as much by the time those youngsters get to school, and with some trauma and whatnot, then we're going to have more school adjustment counselor, guidance counselor services for these youngsters. So this is really their introduction to school and our way to able to connect with them. But I have Mrs. Kudo here, who's the director of the Parent Information Center, and she'll be able to explain a little bit more on how she envisions this position.
Very well.
Hi. So I'm the only one at the Parent Center with any kind of social work background. So we have clerks that register students. They don't have the background knowledge around assessing students and families on what their needs might be. This position would assess the family and child for needs and then plug them into those services in the community and then follow up with them to make sure. For example, a family comes in, they need SNAP benefits, they need insurance, they don't even have a doctor, that person would hook them up with all those services and then follow up. If that's not done at the Parent Center, then the social workers at the schools have this added task to work with these families, follow up with the families.
What do you mean by follow up and do the work? But that's what the job is of these agencies, that people at the agencies get paid to do.
They get paid to take the applications, but if a family doesn't follow through, then they get dropped. So now the child doesn't get the needs met. So we have families who come in and their child does not have immunizations, for example. These kids are, initially out of school until they get those immunizations. And we need somebody who's going to follow up with these families, make sure they get an appointment right away. There's times that I have to call the doctor's offices myself to push it along, or the student would be out of school. These are all things that are, very time-consuming and needed for these students. They shouldn't be sitting at home. They should be in school.
That I agree with, absolutely so.
And they need to have those needs met. A clerk is not trained in assessing the families on what those needs might be.
Are you telling me that right now there are students that are not receiving social agencies assistance because of the fact that they don't know about it?
Yes. Yep. And they don't follow through.
Well, if they don't follow through with an agency, what means that they're going to follow through with you?
Because we're going to help them make those phone calls. We're going to make sure that they need Mass Health. We're going to sit with them and fill out the Mass Health application. They need SNAP benefits. We now can have this person trained where they would be able to apply for SNAP benefits at the PACE Center. So when they register their kids and they need SNAP benefits, they'll be able to get those SNAP benefits on the spot.
You can get those right at the employment center.
Yep, but they would have to get there, and they don't have transportation.
Okay, thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Okay.
I yield.
Yield? Okay. Do you have a point of order or something, Mr. Vice Chair, because Mr. Corey's next to speak?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, I
They
just
put
don't
me
know
in
if
the
it was
queue?
a point of order or something.
No,
Mr.
you
Corey?
put me in the queue.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. In regard to this position, agencies cannot regulate as efficiently as the Florida Public Schools can. As Mrs. Kudo stated, it's a process of identification at the intake, and all of a sudden, we will have our own employee identify each student as they enroll in the school department, and then put in touch immediately with that school's support personnel at all levels. It could be a behaviorist, an interventionist, an adjustment counselor, a guidance counselor, you name it. But the process of identification would be completely clarified with a position like this. So I'm in full support of the direction for the position. I have a couple of questions for you, Dr. Dargan. Given this position, is there an avenue out there right now in the stratosphere for grants heading in this direction?
Yes, many funding sources that we're either in the process of applying for or have already applied for, yes.
So that means like this is a program that could be self-sufficient in many, many ways, and yet directed by our own personnel to make the entire process efficient in identifying the needs for these kids. And then we could refer them to the proper outside agencies for more support as need be, whatever their case calls for. So that's the way I see it. I feel like the position on our end would be a direct conduit to our own student support system. My second big question is on the job description itself, under qualifications. I'm really pleased to see that bilingual, bicultural preferred. I would even make a motion to say required, you know, I mean, I would almost go that far. At this point, I think that required isn't such a bad idea, but really, I'm in full support of bilingual, bicultural preferred. Let's try to keep that very strong in the job description. Thank you. With that, I yield.
Thank you. Mr. Vice Chair Costa?
Thank you. So can someone definitively tell me, where does the funding for this position come from? Is it grants or operational budget? Because I heard we're applying, we already applied, we're considering applying, there may be money out there. Is this going to be grant funded, or is this going to be operational money?
It's our hope that it's going to be grant-funded. However, it is one of the positions that was the additional positions in the budget. So if we cannot secure funding for it, it may be operating. However, it's our hope and our understanding that many of the early childhood, preschool expansion enhancement grants, we'd be able to write this into a grant.
Right.
But it is one of the ones in the superintendent's additional position budget.
Is that part of the one-time money?
Not one-time money, that was part of the budget that you approved at 100% of the net school spending. So the full budget that was approved by the committee included this position.
So then why are we
It's
going
just-
out for grants?
Because
We're just
it's
applying the job description
They're
tonight.
applying for a grant with this job description in it.
Right, but regardless of that, you have the money budgeted in your budget.
But we
We've
don't have a
approved
job
that
description.
budget.
Right.
I'm sorry, without
But
the
we
job
don't.
description. Right.
But we need a job description.
No, I understand. You need the job description, not for the budget, for budget purposes. You already have it in your budget.
But
You
I
need the
can't
job
hire
des-
any, for, right, for
You
the
need the
purpose
job
of hiring.
description for the purposes of grant funding.
For hiring.
Right. You can't hire without a job description. I got it. But what I'm saying is that when the question was asked, where the funding's coming from this, the first thing that I heard was that we're going to apply for grants. But you already have it in your budget, approved with this
Right.
position.
I think there was some
in it.
misclarity on that. I think what needs to be stated here is that when they apply for these federal and state grants, they're including this job description in their
No, I
applications
got
to
that
show
piece.
that.
That was clear. The other piece that was clear to me when the question was asked was that it was going to be grant funded. And then if we can't secure a grant, we'll look for other funding sources. But
That
you
was
already have it
inaccurate.
in your budget.
We have the money to hire this position.
Mr. Costa? I just want to say that if we get the job description approved, we can post it as anticipated and screen for it. If the grant funding does not come through, it's budgeted in the operating budget. However, once it's in the operating budget, you can't move it back and forth between grants and operating funds.
Right.
Okay, you
No,
end
it's
up
a
with a
plan.
problem.
Right,
So,
right, yeah.
so-
I got you. I'm aware of that. I guess, to Mr. Martins' point, and I agree with that, we have a number of social service agencies in the city of Fall River. Have we reached out to any of them to ask them if they'd be willing to have someone from their agency who could sit at the parent engagement center here in our school department, take up space, have a desk, a phone, where they could provide the same services that we're looking for someone to hire to do that work? It just seems like there are a number of social services agencies that make all kinds of decisions and assist families across the spectrum here in the city. Has anyone reached out to see if that would be something that we could invite these people and partner with them? We're doing it with Stop and Shop with food. Has someone reached out to the agencies that People Inc. and others that may have said, hey, we got someone in our office doing that exact work. We'll have them sit at your location 3 days a week for 3 hours a week, and, 3 hours a day, whatever the case may be. I'm okay, listen, I understand the need for supporting families, but you came really close to talking me off supporting this, because I lost in all of this where the personal responsibility is for parents, okay? We're going to call, we're going to make sure they get their benefits taken care of, we're going to make sure they have insurance, we're going to follow up with them. Where's the personal accountability from a parent to do those things?
You're right.
And listen, I get it. People are coming into our district without those abilities, but when they register their child, they're given the resources and the information necessary to get insurance, get SNAP, get whatever resources they need. At that point, we can't keep holding hands, because we're going to continue to create positions where we take the responsibility from parents to be parents. And now we're just going to do that for them.
Well, I think there's cases where, language is a huge barrier. Not all these agencies have the language capacities that we could have and we do have at the parent center. So that's a big piece. Transportation is another barrier. It's, I don't want to say that they just don't want to follow through. Why wouldn't they want to follow through and get SNAP benefits? I think it's just having the means to get there.
And I'm okay with giving them those resources. Here's the DTA office on the bus line. Here's a bus pass if we need to, whatever the case may be. But at some point, parents need to have a level of responsibility for following up on these things, and we can't keep creating positions to sort of enable that. And if it's a language barrier, then someone at intake maybe could assist with breaking down the barrier of the language and making these referrals. These agencies have individuals who speak other languages.
Just point of order. The job description is what we're voting on. The
Right.
position is not, so I think we got to really refocus back to the actual job description and move on from there. The position is already in the budget, it's already been approved. Tonight's agenda item is just the job description. So I think that
Right.
the other discussion is merited for, what other agencies can participate, but for tonight's purposes, we really need to move on with the job
So
description.
how does that not apply to the job description, whether other agencies provide that same service? If
Because
they do, then there would be no need to have a job
But
description.
that,
with
we're
them.
not voting on the position, we're voting on the job description. So the job description is already in the budget, it's already been funded, it's there, so we need to vote on the job description. If you like the job description, great, if you don't, then vote against it.
Okay,
But we do
I
have
yield.
to move on. You yield?
I yield.
Thank you. Mr. Aguirre?
Yeah, so we have parent workers in the system.
Yes.
In a variety of places, not only in the parent center, we have some in schools, we have some in different ranges and all that stuff. What I would like to request of the superintendent is a list of any and all parent workers or anybody of that type with the list of where they work and their salaries, just so we can get a handle on, I'm in support of these things, but it's like we keep on, oh, another parent worker, this one gets paid that, this one gets paid that, this one gets paid, it's real confusing when you look at it from a school committee part-time perspective. So if somebody could put together a memo for us to just say, here's all the parent workers in the school system. I do think the reality of it is, what we're dealing with in schools is we need more parent workers, we need support personnel. I advocate for that all the time. I think the whole committee does. It's a fine line between balance and doing it for the parent or actually helping them to actually take that first step. With that being said, one thing I'd like to add to this is that the person gets a 7D license like we have in transportation. I've said all along that we need all of our transportation clerks to be 7D certified. We need to have some sort of better way of transporting families and students legally with the proper insurances in our district so that we can actually do the work that we want. Because this person could sit in that center with a person that's needy, as you articulated, and they may not be able to get to that, to Health First, let's say. We have people that bring students to Health First, to all other places, to try and help them get the services they need so they can be more productive in life and in the classroom. I'm in favor of all of that stuff. But when we don't put in things like more people that can actually drive students legally, attendance offices, the same thing, we should have vehicles for these people to be able to pick kids up and bring them to school. If we're going to go in and we're going to support, then we need to go all in and support, in my opinion. So I'm not sure if this is needed. I'm going to support it because I think it's a good program, but I think we also have parent workers that are probably doing very similar stuff, that just a different job description. So it's not confusing. It's in the budget. It's here. If you get grant funds, hire 2 more, as far as I'm concerned, because the needs are great, and I want to support it. I will make an amendment, a motion to add that the person gets a 7D license so that they can drive.
Okay. Motion's been made. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. Roll call.
Discussion, please.
Sorry, Mr. Martins, discussion?
Yes.
On the motion.
There is a policy of the school committee that indicates that if the superintendent wants to have a new position, that position has to be brought to the school committee before anyone is hired for that new position and get approval for the establishment of that position. Now, the fact that it was included in the budget, that budget is this thick in there. And now to find, when I asked the wonderful people here to how are you going to fund this thing, and it went around and on, then finally it said, well, we can get it, it'll be a budget item. But it's already in the budget in there. But was this position, as a new position, was this position brought forward to the committee to be funded in there? Or was it just thrown into a voluminous document that, I'm sorry, that I didn't read every single position in there?
didn't?
I took it for granted that what you were putting in here is indeed established positions.
Okay, Mr. Martins.
I gave you a list, Mr. Martin,
Hold
it
on,
was
hold on.
70.
Mr. Martins, point of order, though. I called on you for discussion on the amendment that Mr. Aguirre made. That is what we're talking about right now. The position is not on the agenda tonight. It is the job description. That's it. Not going to entertain any more questions on this regarding position, whether it was in the budget or not. Take those concerns up with the superintendent after the meeting, during the next meeting, via email, whatever you want to do. But we're going to move forward with this particular item. So if there are no further questions on the amendment that Mr. Aguirre proposed, we're going to take a roll call on the amendment. Roll call, please.
Mr. Aguirre?
Yes.
Mr. Coogan?
Yes.
Mr. Costa?
No.
Mr. Hetzler? Mr. Corey?
Yes.
Mr. Martins?
No.
Mayor Correa?
Yes. Motion carries. Okay, now I'm going to take a vote.
motion?
Yep, on the motion,
Amended, or
as amended.
Oh, that was the
you took it up together?
What is it?
You took it all together?
No, I'm going to now take a motion on the
Okay.
amended motion. Yep.
All right.
Motion on the amended motion. Motion on the amendment has been made, was voted on, so now the new package. Is there a motion?
Roll call. We already, I think we seconded it in motion, but,
Okay, just to be sure, I don't
Yep,
want
roll call.
open meeting laws.
Got it.
Okay, roll call.
Mr. Agia?
Yes.
Mr. Coogan?
Yes.
Mr. Costa?
No.
Mr. Hetzler? Mr. Corey?
Yes.
Mr. Martins?
No.
Mayor Correa?
Yes. Okay, item number 11, thank you. Item number 11, discussion and vote to approve the fourth quarter transfer. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion has been made. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. Questions on the fourth quarter transfers? Mr. Aguirre?
Just, I know it's basically the quarter, so it's at the end of the year to wrap up everything.
Yes.
With this being said, is this all equaled out to zero, or do we have any extra money that we need to?
It's all equaled out to zero. It's a total transfer of about $960,000 across all line items. It equates to about 0.9% of the total budget.
So we don't have anything
No.
left over to vote on?
Everything is spent.
And some of these I just had a note on, and I don't have to go into detail on them, but the things that we know along the way, I mentioned this at several meetings
Yep.
throughout the year. As we know, we're going to save $300,000-400,000 in salaries. We knew that the third quarter. I just like, as one member, just like to get that as soon as we know. And I get the idea, we're not sure where it's going to come to, but I think you know my point. Just, I'd rather know ahead of time than vote on all the transfers. $395,000 is not a tremendous amount. We've done a lot more in the past, so kudos to you for getting it done, but I will be supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions, comments? Seeing none, roll call.
Mr. Agia?
Yes.
Mr. Coogan?
Yes.
Mr. Costa?
Yes.
Mr. Hetzler? Mr. Corey?
Yes.
Mr. Martins? Mayor Correa?
Yes. Item number 12, the final item for discussion this evening. Oh, no, was one more on the next page. Two more. Discussion and vote to approve fourth quarter revolving fund. Is there a motion?
Make motion?
Motion has been made. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded. Questions on the fourth quarter revolving funds? Seeing none, roll call.
Mr. Agia?
Yes.
Mr. Coogan?
Yes.
Mr. Costa?
Yes.
Mr. Hetzler? Mr. Corey?
Yes.
Mr. Martins? Mayor Correa?
Yes. Item number 13, discussion and vote to approve year-to-date FY19 budget report. Is there a motion to approve?
Make a motion?
Motion has been made and seconded with a question. Mr. Costa?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Aguirre, for insurance purposes, we've closed out our books, FY19.
Yes, sir.
The total amount that we project has been underspent in healthcare is just shy of $1 million?
Yes, sir.
And have those been confirmed with the city?
Not as of yet, but that is what is posted to the ledger as of today.
When you say posted to the ledger, is that
There's no additional.
document that both the city and the school uses to sort of reconcile?
Correct,
Okay. So
yes.
it's like an accounting,
It's the general ledger for the account, the actual account itself.
so you're confident that that's the number? Okay. With that, I yield. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions, comments? Roll call.
Mr. Agia?
Yes.
Mr. Coogan?
Yes.
Mr. Costa?
Yes.
Mr. Hetzler? Mr. Corey?
Yes.
Mr. Martins? Mayor Correa?
Yes. There are a number of items for our information this evening. Is there a motion to place on file?
Motion to accept them and place on file.
Motion has been made. Is there a second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Oh, you got a question, Mr.?
Yeah, just a quick
Aguirre?
question. It's not relative to the vote, but on this issue, are we, as a policy, getting the exit surveys for all employees when they resign?
No.
The answer was no by the superintendent.
Because I've always been of the belief that I think Mr. Martins champions this cause to try and get some data on why people are leaving. He said no.
We don't do it at the time they immediately exit, we do it periodically. So we send them out a couple times a year.
So you try to get
Yes.
information.
Yeah, we just haven't shared it with the committee. We get it, we just haven't shared it.
No,
with the
that's all I
committee.
was asking
Oh.
was, do
I
we
thought you
do
said,
it
do you-
with all people was my question.
Oh.
But you said no, which I was
I
thinking.
thought you asked if we
Point of-
should be sharing this with the committee. I said, no, we collect it. And
Right, so just figure out like why
Yeah.
people are leaving and
Yeah,
all
yeah,
that.
oh yeah, we work on this a
I
lot.
yield.
Thank you. Mr. Vice Chair?
I could be wrong, but if memory serves me correctly, there is policy that the HR department provides, I think it's quarterly or annually,
Yeah, I would
information
say-
regarding those surveys. So
I would say the response rate is fairly low, but the information we do get, I can go back and gather it from the most recent one.
Right, I can't remember the last time, but there has been presentations in the past with that information, as outlined whether the people left for salaries, if they left to relocate for other professional reasons.
Certainly.
We've received reports from the administration regarding those exit surveys in the past.
Yep.
And I can't remember off the top of my head what the policy states, but I don't know if it's quarterly or annually, but I know there's probably a report due to the committee, so if I could ask.
I can follow up on that.
That be provided, I'd appreciate it. Thank you, I yield.
Thank you. So there was a motion to place all the FYIs on the record and accept them, and it was seconded. I just need ayes or nays. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Unanimous. Okay, we do, let's see, where are we?
New
New
business?
business? Any new business this evening? Mr. Aguirre?
Yeah, so approximately a month or two ago, I had brought up the issue that we had some additional funds coming in, and to allow the superintendent to hire officially, I think it was $1 million or whatever it was, to try and get the jump on it. All indications that I've heard that was very successful in the schools to get things moving forward. But we're still waiting for a full budget. But knowing that we're going to get all the money that we needed and then some, I'd like to make a motion that we immediately authorize the superintendent to hire all positions in the budget that we approved immediately. So we can lock people in, get them hired. Why wait any longer? Advertise them and get them
This
hired.
motion made, is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, seconded. Superintendent, you want to weigh in?
We're one step ahead of you in terms of posting, and we'll have those hired. I appreciate the vote of confidence. Thank you.
Good, very good. Any other questions, comments? Roll call? No, Mr. Martins?
I don't particularly care for a blanket statement that is to hire all positions, when I don't know what all the positions are. And secondly, I'd like to know what new positions are in FY20 budget that were not in FY19 budget.
So if you refer to your budget binder, there's a page that has the 70 positions that were talked about at length. You want to come see me tomorrow? I'll go over each one of them individually with you.
On page 70.
There are 70 positions in your budget binder. If you come see me tomorrow, you and I can go over each one of them individually.
Good point. Okay, I shall. I'll call your office.
Okay, perfect.
You yield, Mr. Martins? Thank you. Roll call.
Mr. Agia?
Yes.
Mr. Coogan?
Yes.
Mr. Costa?
Present.
Mr. Hetzler? Mr. Corey?
Yes.
Mr. Martins? Mayor Guerrero?
Abstain. Did it pass? We have enough? Didn't pass.
3-3.
Failed.
Question?
No, it was 4.
4? Who was the fourth? No, it was 3.
3-3.
3-3.
Defeat.
Three
Oh, I'm sorry.
abstentions?
Yep,
3
I'm sorry.
abstentions, 3 approve.
Question?
Question on what?
What just happened? Now what?
The vote was taken.
So the way I take it, the way I look at it is, we have an approval that we allowed the superintendent to hire a certain number of people. Without that approval given by this body, he cannot put out letters to hire the entire list of all those people. There's some jobs that we've asked for that aren't even advertised yet. So abstaining is only going to stop the process of hiring the rest of the people, then we know the money's going to come in.
Mr. Aguirre, there are people that abstain for their own personal
So my question,
reasons,
I'm asking a
so-
question to you or the superintendent or somebody. Now what?
The superintendent has the ability to hire those individuals.
No, he doesn't.
I disagree. Well, it wasn't on the agenda anyway, so, I mean, you're bringing it
You
up
what?
on the new business without any time for anybody to discuss this, to look at it. There's no documentation in front of us.
When did the numbers come in?
This past week.
And was there discussions today with the city and the superintendent relative to the budget?
Superintendent and I had a casual
Yeah,
conversation
within-
about the
Within
number,
48 hours, so I found out when we walked in.
because I told you,
Yeah,
correct?
exactly, which is good communication, I have no problem with it. So I just found that out today. Common sense says, under new business, I could bring up something like this. So I don't want to be criticized for bringing up an issue.
Nobody's
My
criticizing
issue
you,
is
Mr.
that we need to authorize the superintendent to hire all the folks. He does not have that authority right now, because a budget hasn't been approved by the legislature officially. So until that time comes, we don't know exactly what we have. We offered him some leeway to hire some of the people early, which I thought was a great vote. And this one is just now going to hold up the process a little longer. With that, I yield.
Thank you. Okay, any other new business? No? Okay, great. There is a reason for executive session this evening, so can I have actually, I'll ask Attorney Assad to read the reasons for executive session, and I'll ask for a vote to go into executive session.
First will be Mass General Laws, Chapter 38, Section 21A7, to review and approve executive session committee minutes for the June 10, 2019 regular meeting of the Fall River School Committee. Secondly, would be Mass General Laws, Chapter 38, Section 21A3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining relative to all government program employees, including without limitation paraprofessionals, parent workers, and clerks of the Fall River school system that are paid from federal or state grants and represented by the Fall River Public Schools government programs, as the chair has determined that an open session may have a detrimental impact on the bargaining position of the committee. Mass General Laws, Chapter 38, Section 21A1, to review the open meeting law complaint dated June 14, 2019, filed by Patrick Higgins and Associates regarding and alleging that the Fall River School Committee meeting of June 13, 2019, the Fall River School Committee was a violation of the open meeting law, as the agenda issue item was to reject transportation bids for the following successful low bidders: Amarillo Bus Company, Whaling City Transit, and Fisher Bus Company, Inc., rather. The school committee voted to also reject a transportation bid with Tremblay Bus, which was not listed on the agenda. Secondly, Mass General Laws, Chapter 38, Section 21A1, to review the open meeting law complaint dated June 14, 2019, filed by Patrick Higgins and Associates regarding alleging that the Fall River School Committee meeting of June 13, 2019, the Fall River School Committee was in violation of the open meeting law by not listing the titles of the positions under the agenda item of, quote, discussion and vote to approve unfilled vacancies for FY20 budget. Next will be Mass General Laws, Chapter 38, Section 21A2, to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel and/or to conduct contract negotiations with non-union personnel, including Ann Doggan, Assistant Superintendent of Social Emotional Learning, Health and Wellness, and Student Support, Michael Loesch, Assistant Superintendent of Special Education Services, Adam Frazier, Re-engagement Specialist at RPA, Slocum Sheen, Administrative Intern, and Dana Hurley, Administrative Intern. We will reconvene. There may or may not be statements at that time.
Thank you. Is there a motion to go into executive session? Motion for executive session? It's been seconded. Roll call, please.
Mr. Agia?
Yes.
Mr. Coogan?
Yes.
Mr. Costa?
Yes.
Mr. Hetza? Mr. Corey?
Yes.
Mr. Martins?
Yes.
Mayor Correa?
Yes.
Mr. Agia? Mr. Coogan?
Yep.
Mr. Costa?
Here.
Mr. Hetza? Mr. Corey? Mr. Martins?
Here.
Mayor Correa?
Here. Any motions from executive session?
Mr. Chairman, motion to approve the executive session committee minutes for the June 10th, 2019 regular meeting of the Fall River School Committee.
Motion has been made. Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call.
Mr. Agia? Mr. Coogan?
Yes.
Mr. Costa?
Yes.
Mr. Hetza? Mr. Corey? Mr. Martins?
Yes.
Mayor Correa?
Yes. Any other motions?
Motion to approve the contract with Adam Fraser, re-engagement specialist at the RPA.
Motion has been made. Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call.
Mr. Agia? Mr. Coogan?
Yes.
Mr. Costa?
Yes.
Mr. Hetza? Mr. Corey?
Yes.
Mr. Martins?
Yes.
Mayor Correa?
Yes. Any other motions?
Motion to approve the contract with the Fall River Public Schools and Soklim Chien, administrative intern, as negotiated.
Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call.
Mr. Agia?
Yes.
Mr. Coogan?
Yep.
Mr. Costa?
Yes.
Mr. Hetza? Mr. Corey?
Yes.
Mr. Martins?
Yes.
Mayor Correa?
Yes. Any other motions?
Motion to approve the contract with Dana Hurley and the Fall River School Committee as the administrative intern, as negotiated.
Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call.
Mr. Agia?
Yes.
Mr. Coogan?
Yep.
Mr. Costa?
Yes.
Mr. Hetza? Mr. Corey?
Yes.
Mr. Martins?
Yes.
Mayor Correa?
Yes. Any other motions?
To adjourn?
Motion to adjourn has been made. Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Agia?
Yes.
Mr. Coogan?
Yes.
Mr. Costa?
Yes.
Mr. Hetzler? Mr. Corey?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mayor Carell.
Yes. Meeting's adjourned. Have a great night.